He's dead. Who? I don't know you. Don't go in there.
Stop it!
I'm telling you, go back.
No!
His brains are on the floor. You're lying. The nurses said you barely even looked at him when you pulled the trigger. And then you just walked right past his body and out the door. But I looked at him. I saw him. I was 19.
Welcome back to my channel, where I analyze video games and other media in order to broaden and deepen our understanding of storytelling through narrative and game design. Today I'll be discussing Season 2 of The Last of Us, which adapts the first half of The Last of Us Part 2, the contentious but critically acclaimed sequel to the game that inspired Season 1. For those who don't know me, hi, I'm sapphixated, formerly known as The Last of Us Explained. I'm a queer game writer and content creator who has been analyzing The Last of Us here on YouTube and over on my TikTok account for about 5 years. You can find my previous video essays and live reactions to Season 2 here on my channel. This series has been highly requested ever since Season 2 finished airing, but I've been reluctant to contribute due to the overwhelming negativity that's been permeating online discourse about the show. If you haven't yet, I recommend checking out my previous video about how fan reactions to Season 2 perpetuated a cycle of violence that began during Part 2's release window. Now that the dust has settled on Season 2 and I've had a chance to watch the show again in its entirety, I feel like I'm in a better place to give my analysis. But before we get into this series, I feel the need to make a couple disclaimers and set some boundaries. My goal with this series is to offer my perspective as someone who absolutely loves The Last of Us Part 2 and who also enjoyed the second season. I welcome discussion and respectful disagreement in my comment section, but I will not tolerate bad faith vitriol or toxicity towards myself, other commenters, or anyone involved with the show. There are plenty of other online spaces where you can go to engage in that kind of behavior if you want, but this is not one of them. To be very clear, I am not affiliated with HBO or Naughty Dog, and I have never been paid to talk about The Last of Us other than the ad revenue I receive from my YouTube videos. Everything I'm about to say is my own opinion and interpretation. I haven't listened to any of the podcast episodes or watched the behind the scenes videos yet, though I have read a couple interviews with the creators and have heard some of their more contentious quotes, some of which I will address. I have seen and heard pretty much every criticism that has been leveled against the show, but I will not be addressing every single one in this series. If I don't mention something specific that you took issue with, then it probably wasn't an issue for me, and all I ask is that you respect that. Alright, with that out of the way, let's get into it. I'm going to discuss each episode individually in separate videos. So in this one, I'll cover the broad strokes of what I loved about the season and what I think could have been improved upon. I'll also talk about adaptation and how adapting an active experience like playing a game to the passive experience of watching a show or movie comes with certain challenges that simply must be taken into consideration when talking about The Last of Us Part 2 in particular. Generally speaking, I enjoyed the performances of the cast this season, but the standouts were definitely Bella Ramsey as Ellie, Caitlin Dever as Abby, and Isabella Merced as Dina. I knew that Bella was going to slay based on their performance in Season 1, but Isabella Merced was a pleasant surprise for me because I hadn't seen her in anything else. Now I know that she's a rising star in the industry, and it's easy to see why. She's incredibly talented, charming, and captivating to watch. I loved the humor and charisma she brought to Dina, and her chemistry with Bella was palpable. As for Caitlin Dever, I knew she's a fantastic actor, so I wasn't really worried about her performance, but she still blew me away. Abby is my favorite character in The Last of Us, and even though I was a little disappointed that she wasn't going to be super jacked in the show, as soon as I saw Caitlin as Abby, I was like, yep, that's her. She had such a commanding presence and captured the essence of Abby even without the imposing physique. It's even more impressive that she was able to continue working and give such an incredible performance so shortly after the passing of her mother. In the game, Abby channeled her fury through her physicality, turning her body into a weapon to face the monster who killed her father, and working out to the point of exhaustion every day so that she could sleep without being plagued by nightmares. While I understand that Abby's physique in the game is a big part of her backstory, it ultimately isn't essential to the emotional core of her journey in the game, and certainly isn't the be-all end-all of Abby's character. Naughty Dog designed Abby that way in an effort to differentiate her from Ellie in gameplay, to contrast Ellie's stealth and nimbleness with someone who is more of a brawler, and then came up with the narrative justification for her design after the fact. If you look through the art book for Part 2, you can see the many variations Abby's design went through before they settled on her final look, which, as we all know, is iconic. But what remains consistent with every iteration is her story, an angry young woman who believes vengeance will bring her peace, but who becomes emotionally and spiritually lost after finally obtaining it. She doesn't need to be built like a professional CrossFit athlete to tell that story, and there are lots of other ways they can demonstrate her obsession with revenge other than bodybuilding. We've seen some of it in Season 2 already, and Season 3 will likely reveal more of how this version of Abby has been coping over the 5 years since she lost her father.
Hi. Came to pick you up.
Oh, you're on this run.
Uh-huh.
One of my favorite aspects of Season 2 is the depth they gave to Ellie and Dina's relationship, and to Dina's character. We got to actually see their romance develop instead of just hearing about it through dialogue. You know, the whole show don't tell thing. I appreciated that they didn't leap right into a committed relationship after Joel's death, and that we got to see them as friends before they became lovers. There was still some insecurity and uncertainty there, which made for much more compelling drama between the two of them and spoke to their youth and inexperience. Their budding love story offered a much-needed reprieve from the misery and horror of other events in Seattle. Dina was a much more active player in the story, with her own investment in going to Seattle, now that they established her close relationship with Joel. I loved seeing her journey of coming to accept her sexuality, especially since the show is set a decade earlier than the game, and thought it offered a nice contrast to Ellie, who hasn't really ever shown doubt in her identity. I loved getting to see some characters and moments that were only briefly referenced in the game, such as Eugene, Ellie's relationship with Kat, and the WLF ambush on a Fedra convoy. I liked how the episodes in Jackson revealed more about life there and fleshed out some of those characters, including Jesse and even Seth. I enjoyed the addition of Gale as a sort of outsider's perspective on Joel and Ellie, and how it's ultimately revealed how their stories are intertwined. I liked that Season 2 carried through themes from Season 1, such as family, the toxic side of love, and the divide between the pre- and post-outbreak generations. The show expanded upon one of the major themes in the game to include even more perspectives on the events that take place and the factions we encounter, including Jackson. I found the show struck a great balance between familiar moments and scenes and new or different ones. While some of the dialogue, sets, and scenarios were lifted right from the game, I still felt I was being kept on my toes, even as a die-hard fan, and enjoyed the vast majority of changes and additions they made for various reasons. Now, on the flip side, there are some things I generally disliked about the season or thought could have been improved. For starters, I'll echo what I've seen a lot of people say. Overall, I thought the show has an air of being too polished. More so than Season 1, I could feel the Hollywoodness of the production. The costumes were too clean, the hair too done, and the makeup, especially for some of the female characters, unrealistic for the setting they're in. Additionally, apart from the episodes that Ksenia Sereta shot, I felt that the cinematography was generally lacking grit and favored smooth, refined shots over organic movement and framing. I'll point out specific instances of this when we get into the breakdown of the episodes, but I will say it's particularly apparent in Episode 2. I also found that the season was overscored. There were so many moments where music was used to punctuate a scene that didn't really need it. It's as if they didn't trust the actors' performances to convey the emotion of the scene without a Gustavo Santaolalla sting coming in to tell the audience, by the way, you should feel sad now. For For example, when Ellie finds Joel's jacket in his room and Unbroken starts playing for what feels like the 100th time in 3 episodes, I think it would have been even more impactful if we had just lingered in the silence of the moment, with only the sounds of her broken sobs to orchestrate the devastation Ellie feels. Similarly, both times they showed the scene at the dance, they had a version of longing play over Joel's exit after Ellie yells at him, and I just thought letting the awkward silence and murmurs from the crowd play out unaccompanied would have been more effective. Writing-wise, I don't think that the writing of Season 2 was bad or lacked subtext, but I will say it was quite apparent when Neil Druckmann and Hallie Gross were also in the writer's room, because those scripts certainly stand out. But the season overall had some great moments with rich subtextual implications and plenty of humor, heart, and heartbreak. I did find there were some scenes, even in the Neil and Hallie episodes, that were overwritten, and there were instances of clumsy exposition in dialogue, but this happened in Season 1 as well.
We are in a war against a military dictatorship to restore democracy and freedom. Does that sound about right?
I've said before that the dialogue in The Last of Us Part 2 is a masterclass in saying a lot without actually saying a lot. This is partly a reflection of the talent and skill of the writers, but I think it's also a necessity of the medium. In video games, every single line of dialogue is budgeted and accounted for. Every minute spent in the mocap volume with actors costs thousands upon thousands of dollars. They also have to limit the runtime of all their cutscenes so as to retain player attention. Each scene is meticulously crafted because it has to be. They don't have the time or budget to dive into exposition, long explanations, or soliloquies about the characters' inner thoughts. I've been a game writer for just over a year now, and one of the steepest learning curves has been realizing that game writing is such a specific craft with at times unforgiving constraints. Anything that isn't absolutely necessary will eventually get cut. TV also has restrictions and a budget, but there is generally much more room to have longer scenes with more dialogue because that's pretty much all a television drama is. We don't need to infer Dina's entire backstory based on a few gameplay lines while wandering around Seattle. Instead, we get to hear her talk about it at length, see it in her face, and really learn about how it affected her and her outlook on life. The show doesn't need to limit their scenes to 3 minutes so the viewers can get back into gameplay. The drama is the show. The Last of Us is indeed classified as a drama, not an action piece. In that sense, the show presents the story in almost an opposite fashion to the game, whereas the game had to precisely compose its moments of drama to serve the action-adventure genre of the game, the show needs to carefully pick and choose its moments of action in order to best serve the drama between the characters. I personally never wanted either season to feel like a one-to-one recreation of the games. I wanted them to feel like lore extensions of the world, characters, and stories I already love, and that's exactly what I feel we received. I also accepted that compared to Season 1, the second season was probably going to take more liberties with the plot, and that's simply because Part 2 is twice as long as Part 1, has double the cast, is non-linear, and is very much specifically designed to be an interactive experience. The Last of Us Part 1 is a more straightforward story, and so I knew it would translate more directly to an episodic television format than Part 2 would. Not to mention, Season 2 was only greenlit for 7 episodes to cover half the game, which is a network decision, not a creator one, that was likely also impacted by the SAG-AFTRA strike. Part 2 as a whole is approximately 30 hours long, so the show only had about 7 hours of screen time to condense 15 hours of content. That much alone necessitated some major cuts, especially of long action or traversal sequences that don't actually advance the story. That's why I wasn't surprised at all that sequences like Hillcrest were cut. While I love Hillcrest as a gameplay level, so much so that I made a whole video about it, I knew that it was very likely going to be cut from the show because it literally doesn't advance the plot at all, apart from running into Jesse, which I knew they could cover another way. I also wasn't surprised that they cut Jordan, Leah, and Nick from the show completely, because those 3 characters don't contribute to the advancement of the story other than providing intel for Ellie and Dina to get to the next step in the game. They don't reveal important information like Nora does, or play as big a role in Abby's life as Mel and Owen do. Even so, the show managed to keep some pretty iconic action sequences anyway, like the TV station and the subway escape, which looked stunning and had me on the edge of my seat despite generally knowing the outcome. Now, as we know, in the game the Seattle days are interjected with flashback sequences recounting the degradation of Ellie and Joel's relationship over the 4 years between games. While I love that device and there is a specific reason the flashbacks are positioned the way they are in the game, I wasn't too shocked that they condensed them all into one episode, for the simple fact that Pedro Pascal is probably one of the busiest actors in Hollywood right now. I also don't think spreading the flashbacks out would have allowed for more screen time of anything that happened in Seattle. If each episode is 45 minutes to an hour long, devoting even a third of the runtime to a flashback is both a significant chunk and also not really enough to flesh out a flashback properly. It also probably would have been a nightmare to schedule Pedro Pascal for 15 to 20 minutes of screen time per episode, and likely very expensive. And no, they couldn't have shot all his scenes at once and then spread them out over the episodes, because that's not how episodic filming or talent contracting works. And before any of you point out the video I made emphasizing the importance of the game's structure, you'll notice that I didn't include the flashbacks in my analysis of the game's overall plot structure. The flashbacks are the B-plot, offering a glimpse into Ellie's mindset, revelations about her relationship with Joel, and a momentary change of pace and scenery for the player. We still got that story in the show, only it was told over one whole episode instead of dispersed throughout the season, which actually gave the flashbacks more room to breathe. We'll talk about it more when I get into my thoughts on episode 6. Now, the only change the show made that I didn't really like was how they front-loaded everything about Abby in the first 2 episodes. I had been so confident that they would at least withhold the revelation about who her dad was until the finale, that would be the cliffhanger they'd leave us off with. While I knew they were going to reveal more about her prior to killing Joel in order to avoid a repeat of what happened to Laura Bailey when the game was released, I was pretty disappointed that they laid all her cards out on the table so early on. I did say in my structure video that if they'd reordered when information about Abby gets revealed, they'd be telling a different story than the one they wanted to tell in the game, which was about discovering empathy for a character whom you already hate and know next to nothing about. This aligned the player with Ellie, who also knew nothing about Abby. In the show, from the very beginning, viewers knew more about Abby than Team Jackson did. Revealing who she is and why she wanted to kill Joel does indeed change the story, as it offers the audience the opportunity to empathize with her in tandem with witnessing Joel's death, and also has the potential to put us at odds with Ellie as she embarks on her revenge quest. I don't think that's inherently a bad thing though, because ultimately the show was never going to be able to capture the same story as the game by virtue of its medium. The creators don't need to perfectly align viewers with Ellie because we aren't living as Ellie, we're observing her, and we aren't limited to one perspective at a time like we are in the game. I do wish they had withheld at least one thing about Abby's identity just to maintain some of the mystery, but I understand that since they were being upfront about everything else, they probably figured they ought to give the audience all the information at once and let them decide how to feel about it. And even though in that regard the audience knows more than Ellie does, there's still the dramatic irony of Ellie already knowing what Joel had done at the hospital, which the audience doesn't find out about until episode 5. And of course, the TV audience still has no idea what Abby has been up to for the past 3 days.
We just need more empathy. Wouldn't it be awesome if we could create an experience that lets you safely explore those feelings?
I've seen a lot of people express that Season 2 just generally felt off to them or didn't capture the same feeling they had whilst playing the game, and I think that's for the very reasons I just described. The Last of Us Part 2 was very specifically designed to be an interactive experience which challenges your own perspective, biases, and myopicness. This story translated to TV was never going to feel the same because it couldn't be the same. Passive viewers don't play the same role as active players. We're watching these characters' stories unfold, not hopping on the stick and experiencing it ourselves. And while this is also the case for Part 1, our assumptions and biases don't play nearly as strong a role in the first game as they do in the second, and that's the point. In Part 1, we are just focused on Joel and Ellie. We don't need to care about the perspectives of the hunters or David's crew or really anybody else we come across. Even at the end, despite the moral dilemma it presented, most players didn't hesitate to go on a violent rampage to save Ellie's life, damn the Cure and the Firefly Redshirts. It was us versus them, good guys versus bad guys, and that's it. Part 2 flips that completely on its head, forces us to see the other side, And as a player, your willingness or unwillingness to embrace that will make or break your experience of the story. In the show, since season 1, we've been exposed to a broader range of perspectives than we ever were in part 1. They introduced themes which would become extremely relevant to season 2, presented us with stories about how different people coped with the apocalypse that we never got to see before. While games are an amazing vehicle for placing players firmly in character shoes, TV provides a buffet of perspectives and experiences through which to observe the main characters and continually evaluate your own assumptions. And so it really shouldn't come as much of a surprise that this carried through to season 2, giving us glimpses of the different factions in Seattle, as well as expanding on different characters' outlooks on Ellie and the broader themes presented in the story. They could have gone all out with it and intertwined Ellie's and Abby's 3 days, but I think even despite some of the changes, it's still important to witness each of their stories separately in order to really drive home the idea that in this story, perspective is everything. The last thing I'll address in this section is one of the most common critiques of this season that I've encountered, which is regarding how Ellie was written. Again, as someone who loves this story and knows it like the back of my hand, nothing Ellie did or said jumped out at me as entirely out of character from her game counterpart. Though show Ellie is a little different from game Ellie, just like show Joel is different from game Joel, I could trace everything she does and says to a moment either in the games or in the first season that supported it. I'll point out specific examples as we get into the episodes. But one of the quotes from the creators that I've seen get thrown around a lot in order to condemn the show's depiction of Ellie is with regards to her competence. Let's take a little refresher on what competence means, shall we? Competence refers to one's ability to successfully and efficiently complete tasks. It has nothing to do with intelligence. It's about capability and proficiency. If you actually look at the canon actions that Ellie makes in the game, that is, what she does in cutscenes, not how you personally control her in gameplay, you'll find that many of them are not carried out successfully or efficiently. She botches multiple interrogations, gets her ass saved by Dina and then puts her at risk, traumatizes herself by torturing a woman to death, nearly drowns on the way to the aquarium, and never finds her actual target. Dina is the one setting them in the right direction, urging Ellie to take care of herself, and doing all the tracking after fixing the radio in the theater. Jesse is the one who ultimately drives the pair out of Hillcrest, finds Tommy and brings him to the aquarium to reunite with Ellie, and Abby is the one who eventually tracks Team Jackson down after finding the map. You know, the one Ellie dropped at the aquarium after murdering Owen and Mel.
And Abby seemingly is not like Ellie, in that Abby is incredibly competent. We don't know yet how she found them. And when Abby shows up in a theater, she doesn't screw up. She gets Tommy on the ground as a hostage. She shoots Jesse the instant he comes out the door. She is in complete control of the situation.
Craig Mazin never said Ellie is incompetent. He said that she is not as competent as Abby. That doesn't mean Abby is smarter and doesn't mean Ellie is stupid. Abby is simply more experienced with tracking and commandeering a situation than Ellie is. Note as well Mazin's use of the word seemingly. Abby seemingly is more competent than Ellie, in that after Ellie spent 3 days hunting Abby to no avail, Abby showed up at the theater within hours of finding her dead friends. But the TV audience doesn't yet know what Abby has been through to get to this point. Abby, in the show anyway, is 5 years older than Ellie, has been living in a violent militia for 5 years, and is a trained soldier being groomed to take over the entire WLF operation. Of course, Abby is more competent than Ellie, but again, that doesn't mean that Ellie is completely incompetent herself. And in that same vein, I've seen a lot of people call Ellie stupid in the show. Does she do some stupid things? Absolutely, she does in the game too. Objectively, traveling to a strange city you know nothing about to kill someone with only your girlfriend, your horse, some guns, and the clothes on your back is pretty stupid. I think it's just more apparent in the show because they admittedly do lean on her brashness for comedic effect a lot. Plot points are closer together, and we don't have long stretches of gameplay where we see her hacking away at humans, infected, and dogs to make us feel like we're a competent player. I've said it once and I'll say it again. Gameplay kills are not canon. The only people Ellie kills in the game that are actually canonically part of the story are the ones you must kill in order to progress, and the ones she kills in cutscenes. That's because everyone's playstyle is going to be a little different. Some players take out every single enemy in one area, others sneak by as many as they can and only take out the ones who get in the way. If you count the canon kills that Ellie makes in The Last of Us Part 2, there are in fact only 8. Jordan, this random WLF driver who will shoot you if you don't shoot them first, which I found out the hard way during a permadeath playthrough. Whitney, Nora, Mel, Owen, and the 2 rattlers in Santa Barbara. So many people were expecting this live-action 19-year-old kid to go on a murder spree, taking out grown adults in an armed militia or violent cult based on non-canon gameplay that did not advance the story, and it truly baffles me, especially considering the first season cut out a lot of unnecessary violence too. There are plenty of ways the show depicts Ellie's downward spiral other than murdering 4 people this season. And no, I don't think Show Ellie was stupid. She was impulsive, impatient, inexperienced, and unprepared for what she was walking into, which, when we're dealing with a live-action show with a real-life young person playing this role, is much more realistic for Ellie's situation. In fact, I can guarantee that if she had gone full John Wick, people would be calling her a Mary Sue or a girl boss, especially given how people talked about Abby not being able to realistically kill Joel with a golf club if she's not super jacked. And even though Ellie does do some dumb things, there are moments where her intelligence comes through when she gives herself time to think. She is smart, but her tunnel vision throughout much of Season 2 clouds her judgment. I think it's also true that a lot of young people struggle to see the bigger picture or to hold multiple truths in their mind at once. Growing up is about realizing that you aren't, in fact, the center of the universe, and that there is nuance to things you may have previously thought were black and white.
You're smart, Ellie. You're so smart, you're stupid.
Tommy was following Joel, the way you are now.
Well, maybe I'm smarter than Tommy, no offense.
You are definitely smart. Would have made a hell of a lawyer.
Okay, yeah, because I'm stupid.
Because you're angry, Ellie.
Personally, I loved seeing the main female character of a huge mainstream show be so heavily, obviously flawed. They didn't even change her much more than they changed Joel, but I don't see nearly as many people complaining about Joel's portrayal. Audiences, generally, historically, are much more forgiving of male characters' flaws than female characters. This was true for the game, and now it's true for the show. Ellie being brash, reckless, and impulsive, the same qualities we witnessed in Joel in Season 1, are suddenly being lauded as egregious writing errors when those are qualities I would also apply to game Ellie. And why can't she be irritating sometimes, or make dumb choices, or be abrasive? Why does she need to be extremely capable and consistently badass in order to be taken seriously? Why does this young, traumatized female character always have to be likable, especially considering her game counterpart is also reckless, abrasive, and at times not that likable?
You're infuriating.
You know, you really need to stop letting people rile you up.
It's hard when they're dicks.
Smells good.
They're yours.
You sure?
It's fine.
I think we should go out like Eugene. From old age. Like living a long life.
You? No way. Come on. You're way too reckless.
You ever give anyone else this much grief?
Come on. Fuck, Ellie. Well, you're a burden now, aren't you?
The funny thing is, when Part 2 first came out, people were up in arms saying 19-year-old Ellie was far too different from her 14-year-old self in Part 1, that she wasn't as likable or funny, that she was too somber and morose and not lovable. The through line for all these arguments about the show and the game is the sense of ownership some fans have over Ellie, the imbalanced scrutiny of female characters over male characters, and the entitled assertion that fans somehow know this character better than the people who created her. I've loved this story since the first game came out in 2013 and have been analyzing Part 2 for years, but I would never presume to know Ellie better than the folks at Naughty Dog or the people who have dedicated years of their lives to developing this TV show. And yet, Show Ellie is completely recognizable to me as a modern, live-action adaptation of an iconic, relatable, and deeply flawed character who, in more ways than one, is most definitely still a child. In the show, Ellie was raised by a Fedra military school until the age of 14, where she wasn't even shown how to properly handle a gun. And by the way, Fedra is literally referred to as incompetent in the actual game, but I digress. Spent a year with Joel, where he barely let her take control of her own safety. Spent a month or so fending for herself and nearly starving before enduring an extremely traumatic encounter with a predatory cannibal, and is now being coddled and sheltered by Joel and Jackson after he lied to her face about what happened during one of the most important moments of her life. She didn't even start going on patrols until 9 months before Joel died, and ostensibly was taking fighting lessons behind his back. I think this is one of the ways the theme of harmful love presents itself in the show. In Joel's effort to protect Ellie, he stripped her of the ability to be prepared for what it's like to truly be alone in the wild. She's not as mature and responsible in the show because Joel didn't teach her how to be mature and responsible. I think her immunity and passive suicidality also play a part in her recklessness, and her trauma is a major contributing factor to her lack of foresight and myopicness. It's interesting to me that some people claim Ellie wasn't angry or focused on revenge enough, when to me it was perfectly clear that her tunnel vision and lack of judgment were the manifestation of her trauma and desire for revenge. Her moments of violence were carefully curated for maximum impact, both on the audience and on Ellie herself, killing a man the same way she took down a clicker, scaring herself with the ease with which she was able to torture a woman for information, and unexpectedly claiming 3 lives with a single shot. If she'd been tearing through random people in every episode, these moments wouldn't have been so affecting. Instead, we get to see that every life Ellie takes has an impact on her. In the show, Ellie is not an animated action hero capable of taking on an armed militia of trained, grown adults. She is an angry, traumatized teenager with a death wish who is in way over her head. As many of you know, and as I've already stated, The Last of Us Part 2 is my favorite story and piece of media of all time. I have been championing it since I first played it back in June of 2020 and became aware of the spiral of negativity surrounding its release. When it was announced that the HBO show would be continuing with Season 2 and adapting Part 2, I was initially apprehensive because I was worried it would open the story back up to scrutiny from the same crowd who tried to tear it apart when the game came out. There were some aspects that I felt very protective over, such as Abby's physique and the order in which information gets delivered to the audience, both of which I found out were being changed once they announced Abby's casting and started releasing trailers. Though I was initially disappointed, I refused to participate in any of the online vitriol about it because I didn't want to contribute to the same culture that had marred the game's release window. Maybe it's my own fault for hoping more people who were fans of the game would feel the same way I do, but I was completely dismayed when I realized the show was generating the same kind of hostility and scrutiny that the game received, but from people who supposedly loved the game. I've already made a video expressing my feelings about that, so I won't get into it again here, but I will say one of the comments I've personally received a lot is something along the lines of, as someone who is such a huge fan of the game and has published analytical videos about it, how can you be okay with some of the decisions and changes they've made to the second season? My answer hasn't changed. It's because I love this story. End of. I don't need it to be presented in exactly the same way to still get something out of it. In fact, I was excited to see what changes might be made, how they would tackle certain aspects, to see how that would affect or even deepen my understanding of the game, especially because ultimately, no matter what the show did, the game wasn't going anywhere and would remain untouched exactly the way it is. So instead of getting reactionary or angry, I chose to be curious. They didn't cast a pro athlete as Abby? Okay, why? And how might that impact her story, for better or worse? What could they explore instead? They revealed she was a Firefly in one of the first trailers? Okay, again, why? How might this change the viewer's experience of the story? You'll never hear me say so-and-so would never do or say that. Instead, I will always ask, why would so-and-so do or say that? What circumstances could push them to that response? This keeps things much more open and positive, encourages discussion rather than vitriol, and does away with the notion that I, as a fan of these games, know more than their creators about who these characters are. As a fan, I do not feel entitled to receiving the story again in exactly the way I want. I feel curious and grateful that the creators have even chosen to revisit the story and give us more of themselves, despite all the crap they went through when the game was released. Neil Druckmann and Hallie Gross were respectively co-showrunner and executive producer producer of season 2, which means they had much more sway and creative input than I think a lot of people have given them credit for. This wasn't Craig Mazin ruining the story. This was Neil and Hallie revisiting their story in a different medium and experimenting with a new way to tell it. And knowing this, I would encourage some of you who are really upset with season 2 to sincerely ask yourselves what being a fan means to you. Are you genuinely a fan of these artists and curious about their work and what they have to say? Or are you just wanting to consume a product on your own terms? This isn't to say that you can't critique it or have negative opinions about it, but writing off the show completely because it wasn't exactly what you wanted, instead of investigating what the show did do and why, in good faith, is the exact same behavior that was exhibited by those who bashed the game when it first came out.
We're no better than he was.
I might have lost some of you with this last bit, but hey, you asked for my opinions. Part of the reason I've held off making this video for so long is because I knew some of you wouldn't like what I had to say. Hopefully, even if you disagree with my assessment, you can at least hear me out and try to understand where I'm coming from. So that's it for the broad strokes. I'll be back as soon as I can with individual videos covering each of the episodes in season 2. I'm hoping to get the first one up before Christmas if all goes according to plan. Be sure to subscribe to my channel so that you can be notified when the next episode is uploaded. Thanks so much for your patience and for listening. Until next time, endure and survive.